Hey everyone, I'm Tassinix, and we're just about to start Season 27 of 5 vs 5 Grand Arena. They have just introduced the change that if you are in Kyber, you are now dealing with 3 fleets that you have to place on defense, so you have to save 3 fleets for offense. There are only 7 fleets, so there's not a lot of room for error here. I wanted to make a very brief video here to talk about what the game plan is to set down. So, first I wanted to cover Negotiator. Negotiator being on defense is going to pretty much stay the standard for me. The thing is, though, is that Negotiator ITB, I think, is going to be dead. You can still play it. It's still viable. It didn't get magically worse or anything. But now you need ITB to be part of an Empire fleet, whether or not you plan to put it on offense or defense. So we'll cover Empire here in a couple minutes. But Negotiator, I think your main options here, as far as setting compositions goes. So, when when this fleet first came out in Arena, people were doing Y-Wing, Anakin, and Rex, because Rex will try to cycle turn meter over to Anakin where possible. And there's a potential for it to get out of hand if you have no idea what you're doing. But if you have any idea what you're doing, this composition's beaten by a variety of things, most famously and easily by Rebels. I'd like to think that the new, Executor, the new Finalizer fleet with, with the First Order officers echelon ship is going to make a big difference in Negotiator matchups. I just haven't had a lot of experience to play it yet, and my only attempt so far was a loss. But I'm going to chalk that up to me making an error. We'll cover Finalizer here in a minute. But as far as Negotiator goes, you either can set it with the Rex thing, which I think is old-fashioned, but I think the best way to go is going to be Anakin and Ahsoka. Now, there are certain limitations to this. Just a refresher, most of you probably already know this. A Relic 8 Ahsoka is faster than a double R7 Biston U-Wing ship, okay? That's a helpful thing to know. But if they make one of their Biston U-Wing pilots R8, that ship now outruns Ahsoka. So, if you're thinking about setting this composition with with Ahsoka up front, you can either... you check and see if they're fast enough, first of all, to beat you. And then you have to decide, do I still want to put the fleet down with Ahsoka up front? Because I've made that choice before. And the decision is, either it's A, that's something they don't get to practice often using Rebels against this. Or B, they do use this often, and they just ain't that good. So you have a couple ways to slice it. But I think the superior way to set it down for most situations will be Ahsoka up front. Limited situations where you might want 5s, but that's honestly one of the worst compositions for an opener with 5s up front, I think. Because having him come in off the bench and making a high impact AoE is just a huge deal. And the AI actually plays that decently well most of the time. All right, let's go ahead. Off of this fleet, let's go back to Executor real quick. So Executor, you're going to be setting the standard. Now, you've seen some people setting it without Bosk on the front line, and they'll actually set it with Xanadu Blood, Razor Crest, and IG-2K. So, as I learned, thanks to the kindness of a viewer on my stream a season or so ago, pointed out to me that, hey, this is actually meant to catch you out if you use Malevolence to counter it. Now, because of the change to Executor's AI, where it uses its third ability now to prioritize the lowest health ally, it does kind of, put a real dampener on the Malevolence counter. It's not impossible to pull it off. It's just harder. And it wasn't a super reliable counter in the first place, right? Most people would guesstimate it somewhere around 60%. So having it go kind of south side of that, not so great. But you could set it with IG-2K up front if you are intending to, to force your opponent to fork how they're going to use their rebels, because you can actually counter the Executor fleet with using the Home 1 fleet if IG-2K is up front. So that's one thing. But the standard composition with Xanadu Blood, Houndstooth, and Razor Crest is going to be continuing to be the gold standard to put on defense. It just it's a solve puzzle. Everybody knows what beats it these days, even with Finalizer. But the point is that there's still opportunities to make errors, and it's the best way to give your opponent the toughest time. All right, so enough on that fleet. Next fleet I intend to put on defense, guys, it's going to be Malevolence most of the time. So putting down Malevolence, the tried and true is going to be Hyena Bomber, Vulture Droid, and Sunfac. You can put in Spy and Soldier. You could, the conventional wisdom is the less reinforcements you put in with the fleet, the more Malevolence will take the opportunities to use the other specials and will generate another Vulture Droid, which can keep the pressure moving, right? Maybe more than, calling in Soldier Might or something, right? But I think setting it down with 2 fleets is fine because, if there's an opportunity for the battle to progress long enough for, the Malevolence to win it for you on defense, that second ship might be helpful. I think anything else aside from a second ship is way too much. You don't need to mess with that. Alternative composition for this is to set down, if you are just dead sure your opponent's going to try and do this with Rebels, you can try to impede that by setting Hyena Bomber, Sunfac, and Spy up front with Vulture Droid as the only reinforcement. So what's going to happen is your Hyena Bomber is going to sweep and put down Vulture or Buzz Droids, and then your opponent's going to be really tempted to do everything they can to shake those off, right? So they're going to save their Millennium Falcon wiggle and everything, and try and shake that off. Most opponents aren't thinking too far into the future, so they're going to get rid of those Buzz Droids just in time for your first and only reinforcement to come in, your Vulture Droid, who's going to apply blind to everyone as well as a Buzz Droid. So they're right back into the hot water. It's a beautiful trap. You can catch your opponents out with that. So, for example, remember I was telling you about the primary composition for Executor, and then there's that other one with IG2K up front. It's not the best one to have the IG2K up front in general. But if you really want to psych your opponent, like that he really relies on his Rebels and he's only practiced with his Rebels against both of these fleets, you could force him into the fork. It's like, I know for sure you're not going to try Malevolence against this Executor fleet with IG2K up front, but you've also got this Malevolence fleet that you think you can go after with Rebels too. So make your call, friend. So think about how you want to, when you're scouting your opponent. By the way, always scout your opponent. Try and read into his tendencies when you're thinking about the fleet compositions to set. Now that we have 3 fleets to work with on defense, there's a lot more opportunity to try and force forks on people. You can't really do that when there's only 2 fleets. But now I can offer you an array of choices, and none of them could be good for you. All right, next up, let's talk about Empire. As far as your which capital to use, in general, I think I like how Chimera performs either way now with Interceptor. I think if you're expecting it, first of all, for defense, I think most people that are going to go after your Empire fleet are going to go after it with the intent of killing it very quickly. For that reason, I continue to think that Executrix is a superior capital ship on defense because it plays into the idea of a shorter fight. It's just straight up giving you more offensive power. That's it. Just apply debuffs on the enemy team and watch the free offense roll in. That's all. You don't have to worry about getting to that ultimate with Chimera and trying to end the game on that. Again, we're talking just defensive application here. So you can use your Imperial TIE Bomber here. Gauntlet Starfighter. Guys, if you haven't leveled up your Gauntlet Starfighter, you've been able to get away with it for a while because nobody was really trying to do anything too terribly serious with an Empire fleet until now, until needs have forced it. But here you are. It's the time to get your Gauntlet Starfighter up, guys. Relic 5, these 2 guys, I would say is the minimum to be a frontline ship on a fleet these days. Honestly, Relic 7 feels like a good spot. With people taking ships up to Relic 8 and Relic 9 in some cases, having these guys be as robust as you can afford to make them is a big deal. No, I don't have the Zeta on Gar Saxon. I just don't have the Zeta to waste. It would be a very, very slight increase. Like, it's a very, very minor increase. And I don't think it matters too much. But yeah, these guys are amazing as pilots because that ship kicks ass. So you could have Imperial TIE Bomber, TIE Advanced, and Gauntlet up front, and then you have your TIE Interceptor, your Emperor's Shuttle, TIE Reaper, and I don't know about setting TIE Fighter on defense because it's a low priority reinforcement, and damn, that ship does a lot, man. If you have that ship at Relic 8, you actually, the pilot at Relic 8, you can actually have this thing outrun, Relic 9 negotiators and stuff like that. Incredible ship. So I'm not so sure about setting it on defense. I feel like that's a squandering of it as a tool for GAC. Otherwise, if we're talking about offense, so pretty much the same composition of the fleet, except now you kind of have the option to think about whether or not you want to use Chimera or Executrix. I personally think that Chimera is really powerful on offense now because you can play the fleet just right. You know when to make the right calls on whether or not to heal or to use the AoE turn removal and damage. Plus, TIE Interceptor with that fleet is just fantastic, right? I mean, you're hastening the coming of the ultimate. It's just, it fits really well. It's super powerful stuff. So, think about how you want to use your Empire, but I plan to use mine almost entirely on offense because by setting Executor, Negotiator, and Malevolence, the 3 best fleets on defense, I'm putting all the pressure on my opponent, really, because I'm willing to bet that my knowledge of fleet combat is enough to put me on the better side of even when it comes to who's going to make more mistakes in this fleet matchup, me or my opponent. I'm willing to gamble, he will, so I'm going to make it as hard as he can, and I can punch up with the lower tier fleets. All right, let's talk about First Order, all right? So, this is pretty much strictly an offensive fleet. Guys, please don't put this fleet on defense. You can't trust the AI to do this right. One thing I will tell you from my experience, everybody's seen the videos of this fleet taking on Executor, and it does do the job. You need your TIE Echelon up front for that. You do need it to be Relic 7, I would say, if you're fighting, Relic 8 Razor Crest, Relic 8 frontline pilots. But yeah. Otherwise, if you're not fighting the Executor with this fleet, it is my experience that you kind of want to have Echelon as your first reinforcement. You still kind of want to run old school with Silencer, Crew, and Special Forces. So again, this takes on Executor. You can use it to take on Negotiators, almost any other lesser fleet. Probably wouldn't attempt it against Malevolence, right? So just keep that in mind. How we doing on time, guys? I'm not trying to record a super long video here. Where's the timestamp on OBS? All right, we're at 13 minutes. Good, I'll keep it real brief here. We're almost done, guys. Oh man, and my daughter's getting home from school. Everything's turning out nice. Let's think here. After First Order, I wanted to cover Resistance. So, Holdo. This is another fleet like Finalizer. Guys, it's not really that great on defense. It could be great in the sense that if your fleet is strong, you could set it on defense as yet another fork of a pressure on rebels. But it's beaten by Finalizer. It's beaten by... I think I could easily dust this with Empire. We have a variety of means of stripping their buffs and sustaining the fight for our side. Yeah, I mean, they've got a great kick going on, but we have so much offense with Empire. So, yeah. This fleet, though, so that being said, it's not great on defense. That being said, this fleet is the god emperor of cleanups, guys. You've heard me tell this story maybe time and time again, but I have lost to Executors using, Malevolence in previous times where I have killed none of the ships, just completely wiped, face planted, the whole thing. The only saving grace was that the Executor didn't have its mass assist ability up and ready to go. So that was the only thing in my favor. But I went back in with my fleet here and cleaned up the whole battle. Didn't lose a ship. Got full banners. So if it was going to be a 70, I got a 50 then, I guess, right? So it was amazing though. It's an amazing fleet for any kind of cleanup. It is the mother of all cleanups, and kind of hold it in reserve that way, because it's very resilient. If you use other fleets, that's another thing, guys. When you're using fleets to clean up, consider using Radis first, unless you need to pull a cooldown, and then use Endurance and like 2 or 3 junk ships to pull that cooldown. And then once you've done that, seriously, let this be your first thing to go in, because if you have any other, if you have preloaded ships on the front line that are going to be hitting you up front, this fleet is a lot more tolerant of taking those punches than Rebels or virtually anything else, like Finalizer. Yeah, if you go in that and you take an unfavorable set of hits, you could just be done if you lose your main ship, right? If you lose crew with Finalizer, or if you lose Millennium Falcon with Rebels, battleship sunk, right? So consider using Holdo a lot more often. Put some investment into them, guys. Relic 5 those pilots at the very least. You don't have to do it immediately. Build up to it. But the more you can put into your fleets, guys, the more investment you put into the fleets, especially the ones that you are willing to put on defense, man, that's going to pay dividends. All right, one last thing I wanted to cover here real quick. Who was the last fleet? We didn't really talk about Rebels. So let's go ahead and go over that. Nothing really new here to talk about how to use them. You're still going to use them on offense. You use them against Malevolence, Negotiator, IG2K up front, Executors. There's really not a lot that you can't try and make a decent run at with Rebels. The real limitation to how high you can go with this fleet is the strength of your bigs. Mine is Relic 7. Honestly, if I had the spare Relic 8 to throw at it, I might even do it. But Relic 7 feels like a good place these days, guys. I mean, you take so much damage from these Relic 8 and Relic 9 characters that you fight. Relic 7 really feels like the floor for him. So consider that if you haven't done it already. You'll appreciate it. Of course, you want to have your Han's Millennium Falcon pilots, your Han and your Chewie, as high as you're reasonably comfortable taking them. I took mine all the way to 8. They're cool there. I had them at 7 for the longest time. I don't think it makes a huge lot of performance difference, because if I am losing with Rebels, it's not because I didn't have Relic 8 Han and Chewie. It's because this ship just didn't do any assists, right? All right, and then, of course, we've got Biston's U-Wing. Guys, this is the key to the kingdom. This determines how high of a fleet you can take on. If you have one of these pilots, Relic 7, and the other R8, there is no Negotiator that has, Negotiator comp that has Y-Wing, JKA, and Ahsoka. There's no Relic level of that fleet that you can't take on. You can do it with Rebels. And, this ship is incredibly important. Having the extra investment on it means that it'll survive, and this ship is the bulk of your TM generation for the fleet, so don't discount it. Aside from that, nothing really new here about Rebels, so is there anything else I really wanted to go over fleet-wise? Let's see if I have anything else to cover. Yeah, Interceptor, guys, amazing ship. Get used to it. Y'all know about Ebon Hawk, nothing new there. Are there any other closing notes I want to make before I wrap up the video? Because we're just under 20 minutes, guys. I'm so proud of myself. All right. Yeah, I'm hoping they do some kind of rework of Endurance, since they just reworked Mace, so they're going to have to release a slew of new Galactic Republic ships to go with it, but I think that's in the works. I've already heard the rumors about the A-Wing and whatnot. All right, guys, I think that covers it, but hey, if you're one of my patrons, you're seeing this a week ahead of the general public, so we can have all of that good internal discussion on the patron-only Discord, and I'll be happy to take your questions there. If you are seeing this 1 week in the future on YouTube, please, if you've enjoyed the video, please drop a like, a subscribe, and I'd love to hear your comments, questions. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think about Fleet coming up here. It's an exciting time. They're going to be growing fleets dramatically here within, the next 6 months, because they have to. They have to. There has to be more variety, because there's so much pressure on developing this out. So I'm excited. But anyways, guys, it's been real. It's been awesome. It's been real awesome. And we'll see you again soon. Peace.